And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Africa Today, where we get you the latest news and events taking place on the African scene. And we will start off with our major top stories and reports. And we will start off with this report on the significance of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in supporting trade and investment between and among African countries. Let's check out this report.
Trade between the US and the African region is steadily rising. There was more good news for the successful implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in December 2022, when a memorandum of understanding was signed between the United States Trade Representative and the Trade Deal Secretariat at the US Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. The MOU covers expanded engagement between the two regions and intends to promote equitable, sustainable, and inclusive trade, boost competitiveness, and attract investment to the continent. It was also announced at the summit that the U.S. intended to invest $55 billion in Africa over the next 3 years, and that $15 billion would be deployed in the two-way trade and investment commitment deals and partnerships that advance key priorities, including sustainable energy, health systems, and agriculture. The trade partnership between the U.S. and Africa has been strengthening for some time. In July 2021, the Biden administration announced that it would review the U.S. Prosper Africa initiative started in 2019, with focus on increasing trade and investment between the U.S. and African countries. At the time, the U.S. said that the initiative would focus on improving trade and investment in sectors such as infrastructure, energy, and climate solutions. The U.S. has often expressed its support to the trade deal, stating that it wants to see the growth of Africa's economic power in the world. All future trade agreements signed between the U.S. and African countries will have to align with the trade deal stipulations, and considering the Biden administration's environmental stance, new agreements will likely also include climate change provisions and tariffs on high carbon imports. The administration has also been focusing on trade agreements that don't disadvantage U.S. businesses and consumers. In July 2022, the U.S.-Kenya Strategic Trade and Investment Partnership was signed, outlining the enhanced engagement and high standard of commitment between the two countries. Trade between the two regions steadily rising. At the summit, the Biden administration noted that since 2021, the U.S. has assisted in closing more than 900 two-way trade and investment deals worth around $18 billion across 47 African countries. In addition, the value of private investment deals from the U.S. into Africa since 2021 is valued at $8.6 billion. The U.S. focus on increased engagement and continued trade and investment in Africa has clearly already led to an increase in trade and investment opportunities in both regions.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and now we move on to our next report on climate change and investment within the African countries. Let's check out this report.
As the global race towards achieving the United Nations carbon-free world set for 2050 intensifies, African countries have ramped up investment to tackle climate change in the continent. Akhenaton examines the human investment the continent still has to make to migrate from fossil fuels. Africa's energy transition topped the agenda at the recently held Nigeria International Energy Summit in Abuja, and the reason is simple. The continent has the youngest population in the world, and it is expected to be home to nearly 2.5 billion people by 2050. 80% of them will live in sub-Saharan Africa, where less than half of the population currently have access to electricity, and just 16% have access to clean cooking fuels and technologies. The continent's energy transition is a tall order. It has been estimated to cost $100 billion annually between 2020 and 2040 for Africa to transit from fossil fuels. The executive chairman of the Africa Energy Chamber explained why the continent must leverage its immediate resources to eliminate energy poverty. Experts also advised that although gas had been recognized as a transition fuel, the country must invest in it and leverage it for the development of its industries, kickstarting the economy. Delegates at the summit also agreed that while Africa explored its exponential gas reserves as part of its energy mix, renewables must also be tapped into, arguing that the continent was well positioned to meet its energy needs through renewable and cleaner sources.
Welcome back, dear viewers. And now we move on to our next report on humanitarian needs in Malawi and Mozambique. Let's have a closer look.
Communities in Mozambique and Malawi devastated by tropical cyclone Freddy continue to struggle in the face of an ongoing cholera outbreak due to the persistently high water levels and the destruction of homes, infrastructure and livelihoods. To meet the immediate requirements and promote long-lasting solutions in the two countries where thousands of families remain without shelter, food or reliable access to safe water and health services, the International Organization for Migration is calling for $10 million in Mozambique and $4.7 million in Malawi. Freddy, which caused widespread destruction over 5 weeks in February and March, was the longest-lasting tropical cyclone ever recorded and the third deadliest recorded in the southern hemisphere. In Malawi, the cyclone had affected more than 2.5 million people, displacing over 659,000 and claiming the lives of 676 people. In Mozambique, Freddy has caused significant damage and affected 1.1 million people across 8 provinces. Currently, over 57,000 individuals remain displaced across 33 accommodation centers. As of April 2023, nearly 26,000 cases of cholera had been recorded. IOM and community health activists are working to provide shelter, healthcare services, and promote hygiene best practices, including cholera prevention techniques.
Welcome back, and we're delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Hussein Khalid, the former Minister of Scientific Education and Research. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Khalid, Egypt has achieved remarkable progress in the field of international publications, according to a recent report. How do you assess Egypt's progress in this regard?
Well, to start with, the Shimago website is one of the very important websites that evaluate the value of scientific research in many countries. And this evaluation depends on the number of international publications, on the number of citations from international publications, on the infrastructure, scientific infrastructure available for the scientists in each country. And according to this, Shimago, Egyptian science and also Egypt itself as a country is number 1 now, is number 36 now, and it used to be number 39 since 2 years and 42 since 6 years. So we are progressing with this regard. And it is also number 4 among the Middle Eastern countries, preceded by Turkey, Iran, Israel, and then Egypt, and then Saudi Arabia. And in the Africa, it is number 2, preceded by South Africa.
Right. Well, sir, how do you assess the role of the Ministry of Scientific Research and Education, of course, in promoting this field in Egypt, the field of scientific research in specific?
Well, according to the Egyptian Strategy 2030, and according to the strategy of scientific research coming out of this strategy, with the evaluating parameters that are doing this, this evaluation involves a very rapid increase in the number of labs and the number of scientists that are doing research. Also, the approval of the law of scientific, or especially clinical scientific research, was also issued by the Parliament. Also, the ministry is doing the different projects through the universities and through the research institutes, that our centers that are present in Egypt. And also at the same time, they are providing the budget allowed for conducting research. And according to our constitution, 1% of our income, national income, should be directed to research. And I think we are approaching this figure, and I hope that we could increase more in the coming years, because there are some countries around us that are providing about 4.7% of their income to scientific research.
Sir, how did Egypt succeed in proposing and promoting some useful strategies in the field of scientific research?
Well, we have, at least in the health sector, where I'm specialized in, we have three successes. The development of treatment against bilharziosis, and this allowed us, especially the rural areas, in the 80s and 90s of the last century, allowed to decrease the percent of bilharziosis. Then came the HCV infection and the combat of HCV infection through the research done on Egyptian genomic research that allowed us to have drugs that are suitable for the viral strains that are present in Egypt. And now we are going through the projects related to breast cancer evaluation, detection, diagnosis, and treatment. And also all of these aspects, in addition to many other aspects, are supported by budget coming out from the Egyptian universities, from the Ministry of Research, and from the STDF organization, which is the main budget allowed for Egyptian researchers all over the country.
Right. Well, sir, how can other African countries benefit from the Egyptian experience in the field of scientific research, and how can cooperation take place between Egypt and the other African states in this regard?
Well, between Egypt and other countries, usually we do MOUs through the scientific institutions present in the country with their counterparts in Europe and in the United States, and recently in the eastern part of the hemisphere, the China, Russia, India, and so on, and also through sending missions or sending young scientists to develop and to attain more technological advances outside the country and come back to help in establishment of the labs and infrastructure needed for this. In addition to this, also, we have to encourage the collaboration between the end users. I mean, the businessmen, the NGOs, the factories, the farms, all the end users are very important to collaborate with their counterpart scientists present in the universities. And in other words, we remove the gap, the trust gap that are present between the scientists and the end users in our country.
Right.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
This would be better than going to experts from outside Egypt, because if we increase the collaboration between the scientists and the end users, they are going to supply the budget needed for more research and so on. We are going to go through a circle that are going to be of great benefit for the country and for the scientific research in general.
Right. Dr. Khaled, how do you see the future of scientific research for Egypt and other African states, and what are excellent experiences that Egypt can follow in other countries worldwide?
Well, we have a collaboration institutions, as I said, to do more. I think we are going to, for our Shimango website is improving needs or so. And this is a good indicator that we are going in the right direction.
Right. Well, I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Hussein Khalid, former Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research. Many thanks for your insight. And dear viewers, that brings us to the end of this edition of Africa Today. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up here on Nile TV International.